We answer how and why the Max documentary Bama Rush is a little bit of a letdown. This week on Taking It Down.
An Alabama Take Projection.
Hey, it's Taking It Down, where we prompt conversations for thoughtful, busy TV devotees from these irreverent outsiders. Welcome to this week's show. We're the TV podcast produced by the Alabama Take website. I'm Blaine Duncan, editor-in-chief of the site. I just can't help dissecting why I like what I like and why I dislike what I dislike when it comes to TV and movies and more. With an English degree and a side hustle as an English teacher, I'll try my best to offer insight that you can use for conversation with others or even with us. Luckily, my ideas aren't the only set of viewpoints on the podcast each week, as with me are these hosts. Adam Morrow is an erudite traveling and studio musician with a penchant for fine literature. Donovan Ronwald, a media specialist with encyclopedic knowledge on film and more. And Natalie Morrow, the first person to ask about fantasy, sci-fi, comics, trashy reality TV, and Beyonce's music. From us, you'll get the obvious and the obscure. We are here for the TV and streaming obsessed who are just too busy for anything more than the show or movie itself. We'll give the outside of Hollywood analysis, and like a lot of the Alabama Take productions, it comes with zero Southern stereotype. Let's get into the show. We, at Taking It Down, have one topic in mind today, and that's the HBO documentary Bama Rush. We'll get into it in just mere seconds, but a quick programming note, the podcast will be off next Tuesday, but catch up on your favorite TV and streaming. We'll try to do the same. I think Adam's woefully behind.
I got a lot of television to watch, Blaine. A lot of TV.
This guy's been on the road in Europe and in a plane over Europe and over the Atlantic, playing music, making music. That's what he does, so good for him. The idea here is Adam's back. He's been gone for a while. It's his first show back. We'll be off next Tuesday. But right now, we're just focused on the one thing, and that's we're going to devote the whole podcast to this documentary, Bama Rush, from HBO. Really, it's one of the first big productions, seems like, for Max. It's just Max now, the streaming service, which umbrellas HBO, Discovery, and more. Directed by Rachel Fleit, the doc is based on basically 4, give or take, young ladies who rush at the University of Alabama just last year, like just in 2022. Late summer of 2022 is when rush usually happens, or in the late summer, early fall. It documented their time building up to that, so it went back a year and then built all the way up to that moment. So if you haven't watched it, we're going to talk about it in depth, spoilers. Just come back to this episode if you haven't seen it yet. We're going to dive right in. All of us here at the podcast, including Donovan when he's present, are graduates from the University of Alabama once or twice over.
That's how you can, people probably already inferred that from the high caliber of the program that we were University of Alabama educated.
We are, all 4 of us. Did you have any special insight to Rush, sororities, Greek life?
I mean, I had some friends go through it, but...
Oh, really?
Yeah, and the more that I learn about some of the ins and outs of it, the more I'm, surprised that they went through it. Just I don't know, but I'm not necessarily the best judge of character, so... and I could be wrong about some things, and it could have been totally different. When I was there almost... I don't know how to do math.
12 years ago?
12 years ago?
14?
15 years ago.
A long time ago. So I don't know, but...
16 years ago.
2006.
He just keeps adding numbers. What's he doing?
I don't know, but it's really rude. He should go back to Europe. But, I mean, that doesn't mean I know anything about how it was. I just knew people that went through it.
That's a little more than I think I can bring to the table. Adam, you worked, not only did you graduate from UA, you worked for the University of Alabama, and not only that, you are a documentarian. You worked as a documentarian at one time, so we talk in the intro how you're a musician, and we say you're erudite and all this. We're sort of half joking, but you really have worked as a documentarian, and you've watched a little of the film. Anything you know about the Greek system at UA or experience?
My roommate that I had known since middle school, and we're still good buddies, was in a fraternity.
Oh, I didn't know that.
So he lived in the house his last year, so moved out of the apartment. Then it was me and Donovan's roommate. So me and Donovan just had the apartment to ourselves the last year. So I got some glimpse with that, but he was in ATO, which wasn't quite as high caliber as, or high octane, I should say, as some of the other ones.
Caliber might be the right word, and they touch
I,
on that in this movie.
yeah, I think I chose Octane because they had been, I don't know all the history and didn't really care. Like they got kicked off campus for partying too much or something, and part of the allowance back on was that there couldn't be alcohol in the house, so their parties had a little bit of a different flavor, I guess. Than it wasn't as like
Red Bull. Red Bull
crazy.
was the flavor.
I was seriously thinking weed, just a lot of weed smoke.
No, I don't think they were cool enough for that. I don't know what it's like now, but they had just gotten back on campus. But yeah, when I was working for the university, we had a lot of student workers. I had not given much thought to the Greek world other than growing up in Tuscaloosa and hearing things like, that the machine had only been defeated once and that they had even any like local businesses that hung signs for independent candidates, they'd like run them out of business and all this kind of pretty intense stuff. And, the halls of power in Alabama are littered with former machine members and all that kind of stuff.
And even higher up than just Alabama
Yeah.
legislators.
Yeah. And disliking the idea of like riding by a fraternity party on a Thursday night and thinking like, wow, I don't want any part of that. You know what I mean? But I hadn't really like considered it more than that.
Yeah.
But then when we had working as a employee with student workers and that sort of thing, we had a lot of sorority girls who worked for us. And I quickly figured out, were like the best employees.
Really?
Like they were all very conscientious and very hardworking and like hungry to do well. Maybe it was because they had already, I mean, I know that the doc over and over again, they say we represent whatever our letters are.
Yes.
And have to be like, the best grades and the best all this. So maybe they were already a little type A because of that, and then came to us with an interest in film, and were probably like I could see most of the ones who worked for us being like the creative girls. You know what I mean? Like,
Okay.
oh, we'll give it to such and such. She draws really, that kind of thing.
Sure.
Like, but they were all great, and it kind of made me. I remember telling Natalie like, oh, maybe I was. Not that I like am reconsidering my opinion on the Greek system, because ultimately I think it's pretty goofy. But at least for these girls, it seemed to be a good thing, and none of them took it too seriously. And it's funny because we had, speaking about making documentaries, we had this thing that was like an old photo booth that had been redone to have a video camera in it. And they would leave it at different places like public libraries or like events or anything, and all across Alabama. And we would have to go move it around. And there would be questions like, tell me a story about growing up.
Like a challenge confessional vibe is what I'm
Yeah,
thinking.
yeah,
Okay.
exactly.
Okay.
But it would be like a quick snapshot of, for you, it'd be like, what was life like in Sulligent when you were growing up? That kind of thing. Just to capture all of these kind of essays, video essays, really, of like,
Yeah.
it's an interesting idea.
No, it
And
is. Fascinating.
as the years go on, it will become more and more valuable. But we had this booth sitting there, and one of the sorority girls who worked with us for a long time, we really liked her. We were like, hey, can we just like put this out during Rush and just leave it there and just see what they said? But I mean, of course, this was almost 10 years ago. It never happened.
Okay.
But
I thought you were about to say, and we got blank.
No. But I mean, if you spend any time in Tuscaloosa and you're thinking about interesting subjects for a documentary, this is.
Oh yeah.
It didn't take TikTok to know that that's like the low hanging fruit.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
You reminded me that both you and Natalie and even Donovan, our other host, are from Tuscaloosa and Northport area right there. That's probably colored how you viewed the Greek system. See, I came from, you mentioned Sulligent. I don't know that that was not a thought in my head, the Greek system, fraternities, sororities. I knew not one person who came out of Sulligent and went to UA. Honestly, I didn't know very many people who went out of Sulligent and straight into UA.
Yeah.
I knew one girl. She was incredibly smart, and she got a scholarship. The other thing is, so that had to color how you grew. When you grew up, you probably heard way more about it than I would have. So
Yeah.
to
I
me, that's
mean,
really interesting.
I think Natalie will have a better answer for this than I do, but I mean, I think a lot of Tuscaloosa people were kind of already over it. You know what
Yeah,
I mean? Like, you didn't really. I mean, there were people who couldn't wait to get there and do it, but there's also like, going. I always tell people going to UA after going to school pretty far out in Northport. It wasn't like going to a new place, but it was also like a pretty clear dividing line between the two things. But I still already knew a bunch of people and didn't. When people say like, "Oh, I didn't know anybody, so I rushed to like try to
yeah,
make friends," I can sympathize with that in a way that I don't completely understand. Like I can sympathize, not empathize with it. You know what I mean?
I got you. Early in my time in Tuscaloosa, 1997, I had this mild to hot hatred of the Greek system,
Sure.
which this film helped it a little. I'll say that. The first thing I noticed, and I hope it's the first thing everyone notices in the first 5, 10, 15 minutes of the movie, just how white it is.
Yeah.
Now, they purposely choose these black ladies, but they're in the minority. And I'm using that word in a maybe less obvious way. Like, you look at Rush and Bryant Denny, and you just cannot see anyone of color.
It's pretty lily white.
To me, this movie was as much about social media and TikTok.
I mean, I don't think that this documentary is that groundbreaking of a documentary, and I don't think it would have
No.
had an audience without the Bama Rush TikTok. Thinking back to when I was in school and I knew, like, I was in one of those like goofy high school sorority type things, in Tuscaloosa they were like Civinettes and Vista, and like there were these social clubs, whatever, where you did a bunch of
Oh,
volunteer
okay.
work in the community. And from there, a lot of those girls get piped into the sorority system. I remember in high school, my senior year, all of a sudden I was getting postcards in the mail from different sororities inviting me and my mom to teas. Like, because it was just that was how they started that kind of outreach because there wasn't social media. It's, I don't know that it's the same story. It's still just a story about girls wanting to feel good about themselves and
Oh, yeah.
wanting to be accepted. But I don't think that there's what's covered in the documentary. I don't think is as like I think people go in wanting more, like wanting like the machine stuff is really interesting, but just stories about girls wanting to feel good. Does that make for a good documentary?
There was a moment when the three girls are in their house, and the two moments with them where they're making the goofy TikTok video and like trying to lip sync
Mm-hmm.
and like making each other laugh when doing the video. That's the first time I've ever felt any sympathy for people making stupid TikTok videos.
Because you've tried to do silly things to post online. I mean, where are you going with that?
Because I have no interest in doing silly things to post online, but it was like the social media aspect of it was the focus, but it was almost secondary to these young friends making each other laugh. You know what
I
I mean? Like they were like belly laughing at each other,
Yeah.
having a good time. And then the other thing that they said was people think that there's something going on in a sorority that's like nefarious, or they don't ever say the machine in this conversation, but that there's something to it, or they hate on him or whatever. And she said, we're just like sitting there eating our chicken sandwiches and hanging out with each other. Like, I think it is a little
Mm-hmm.
more boring than it gets credit for.
I think the GDI
Oh,
conversation that like you either hear the Greek voice or you hear the GDI voice when you're on campus at the University of Alabama. And I almost
that's
think
true.
the GDI voice is so overly judgmental potentially. Like the machine is an issue. We all realize that there are problems in the system, but it's just a bunch of girls hanging out.
Yeah, well, yeah, and that's what this movie does. To me, there is a part of this movie where you can understand a ton of it. If you've ever watched that movie Eighth Grade, man, it is such a same. You know the concept. It's an eighth grader going into ninth grade. That's the story. It's a young lady, written and directed by Bo Burnham, and she's just these girls in this documentary. She's just wanting to post something online, I'm worried how many likes it might get, worried if she's wearing the correct thing, worried about judgment. I talked about how there's a part of this film that's about social media, but then the other layer around that is about the judgment of young ladies and how social media wants to view them. What's the male gaze of ladies at this age? And that to me, I found a little sympathetic.
Yeah, I
That's what
think that
brought this.
what actually happens seems to be a lot more wholesome, and just like people who are really barely not children anymore, hanging
Mm-hmm.
out with each other and figuring out who they are, and less like machine and crazy parties and all that kind of thing.
Isabel out of California, I think, is the one who says the exact quote. I thought these people were going to be my very best friends.
God, that girl broke my heart.
Maybe it wasn't her, but Isabel at one point maybe says something along the lines that she wants someone to love her no matter what. And it's just, there's such a lack of self-awareness there, and I don't mean that in too cruel of a way, but then you get the exact next scene of somebody saying, I just got kicked out for wearing the wrong sticker. So where's the friendship there? Where's the tight-knit bond? It's quite a juxtaposition. I'm not going to get angry if Adam wears a Lee Baines and the Gloryfires t-shirt rather than a Blaine Duncan and the Lookers t-shirt.
But you've also signed up into a system where those things are important.
That's true.
You know?
That is true. And that's, I think part of my argument is that shit shouldn't be important at all.
But like Adam said, you've signed up not only where they're important, but where there are very strict rules. And it's not just like, oh, they sprung this thing on her and she didn't know. She knew.
That's a good point. A big warning sign for me is anytime a organization uses that many acronyms, I'm out.
Yeah.
My job when they start using them, my mind goes, I'm done. I zone out.
Too much.
Yeah, don't give
They
me
could
that.
chill with that for sure.
Guys, we need to say this. Rush consultant as a job is some late stage capitalist bullshit.
That was like the most cringy moment. You know what I mean? Like what 18-year-olds do, it's like it's obviously going to have a certain level of probably going to be embarrassed by this later in life. Grown ass women making money doing that is just like, I mean, they wouldn't exist if the need wasn't there.
That's
I guess.
I thought that over and over. I was like, God, there is actually a need for this, isn't there? And money to be made. I bet a lot of money. A lot of money. It goes to that quote directly from the movie. The culture at Alabama is fucking weird. Boy.
How this is a bit of a sidebar, but how pissed is Ole Miss that they just totally have gotten jumped? I mean, 10 years ago, this would have been about Ole Miss.
Would it? Was that the sorority and fraternity focus?
I mean, I think that classically that is
or they just party in
heaviest
general.
Greek campus. And I think the Bama one has always been its own kind of flavor, kind of a different thing in second place, but I guess it's just gotten so huge.
I always thought that Bama may not have been as big as Ole Miss, but it was more like prestigious. Because I knew girls that rushed at UA didn't get their top two choices, so they dropped out of UA to go try again at Ole Miss.
That's the vibe I always got, Natalie. That it was more prestigious at UA. It was more
selective.
It's more selective, more controlling. And I felt Ole Miss was definitely, had that going on, but it was the party light atmosphere that comes along with the Greek life is more spread throughout the GDIs, if you want to call them that.
Huh.
That's just the vibe I got. What do I know?
Mean, I don't know what I'm talking about.
I don't either. We just watched the documentary.
Yeah.
Let's decide on, and Natalie kind of already has. I did not think it was a great documentary, but I did think it was pretty good.
I'll just tack something on the end of what I've already said. I just don't think it was presented as what it was. I think it wasn't marketed, and what we got was not what I expected to get out of this documentary.
We got a false bill of goods, didn't we?
Yeah.
Yes, because
this was not an expose.
No,
that's what
it
I wanted.
Right there. Me too. Everyone wanted that. I've seen a lot of people online complain about how that's not what it was, how they came in expecting one thing due to advertising and got another thing.
Well, I saw one review and it just said this was a Rush documentary that didn't show Rush. I was like, that's all you need to know.
It's the build up to Rush. It's the cognitive effect of trying to get ready
Hmm.
for Rush. I don't know that it offered any insight beyond what we already knew. Or it expanded on the TikTok craze. Like, if you liked the TikTok craze, do you want a little more of that? Do you want an hour and 40 minutes of it? Okay, then that's what you're going to get with this. I did see a few complaints online about, and this is, I think, a key component of analysis of this documentary. How did you feel about the director inserting herself into the story?
I mean, that's what pulled focus. That's what directed the story. And she even says that the first time she turns the camera on herself, she says, "I found
Yeah,
my story." It's
yeah.
like, I don't really. I mean, no offense, but I don't really care about you. I wanted something better. I wanted to learn more about Rush.
We did. We wanted the juicy stuff, the dark side, maybe, or at least just more Rush related
Yeah.
things. The film lands on a really sympathetic side of the young ladies, which I understand. I think as individuals, that's important. They should be treated as such. However, as an institution, I think the Greek system needs to be spotlighted more than Fleet ended up doing. She just dropping 3 minutes, 5 minutes about the machine, and then 3 minutes about sexual assault did not seem conducive to what's important. Shining a light on how the young women of the nation feel about themselves is important, but that just didn't feel as grounded as much as it could have been. So I do give it some credit for that. This was a spotlight on this is how young ladies feel because of certain institutions and certain things like social media. But then it just, like, I felt like the more important, maybe dare I say more interesting things were the fact that there's a lot of sexual assault are wrapped up in the Greek system. There is a lot of racism in the Greek system. There is there's this history of the machine, which is finally coming to light within the last 20 years or so. Also, how the hell's John Merrill not in the machine?
That's wild. I went back and listened because I was like, I need more information about the machine. I went back and listened to AL.com's podcast that they did in
Mm-hmm.
2018,
Mm-hmm.
called Greek Gods, and it's all about the machine. And some of
Yeah.
that comes. It's if you watch this doc and were disappointed about no information about the machine, go listen to that podcast. It's 4 episodes.
Yeah.
It was interesting.
If listeners are more interested in a real personal story about machine related things, there's a good story on the Alabama Take by Samantha Simmons. She actually ran and won as a independent for SGA, and she interacted with all those machine people. She tells a few tales out of school in that little document. It's good stuff. The little typing on the screen that you get where someone writes, HBO will not stand a chance against the machine. I just thought, okay,
Sure.
sure.
I told him that there's that clip where somebody's just one of the guys is like shouldn't say guys. One of the camera people is filming a sorority, and you hear a voice say, who are you with?
Uh-huh.
You're gonna need to go. It's like, could you imagine telling this grizzled HBO documentarian, being like some like 20-year-old sorority girl from Alabama, trying to attempt to tell this person, no, you can't film this public place. I don't think that went very well.
Probably not. I wish this movie would have been what the scared people thought it was going to be. Because it seemed like this time last year, everyone was in the Greek system were scared.
Hmm.
Don't talk to the film. As it turns out, there was nothing wrong with talking to this film. I mean, they did nothing. Like you said, an expose. They did nothing exposing. I did determine that the sorority system should have a transfer portal. Got to open it up. Wild to see our guy Ben Flanagan on the screen, though. Did you see him,
Yeah, that was
Natalie,
good.
for the
Yeah.
clip there? Ben's been on our podcast before, so that's kind of funny. I thought it was well presented, well done, well put together, but it just landed like a scared document. It landed like it did not want to ruffle feathers, which goes hand in hand with some of the complaints I saw online that, I mean, UA and the Greek system had nothing to fear. I also saw a theory that it was UA that was kind of driving some of that some of that fear so that people would watch, and now they'll have an influx of new out-of-state money. I mean,
Maybe.
follow
Yeah.
I did think when, because, Ben Flanagan's been posting, because he wrote a
Yeah.
couple articles for Elle.com about it, and he had posted some things about how the Rotten Tomatoes score is just like dismal. It's terrible. So I was like,
Yeah.
oh, the machine's getting in there and posting a bunch of bad reviews. And then I watched it and I was like, well, maybe they're accurate.
Yeah, I think, he was probably tongue-in-cheek on some of that.
Yeah.
There's better stuff out there for the machine, that's what I want to know more about. To me, that is a insidious institution, as not real as they claim to be, as secret. It's John Archibald, I thought, did a good job of really driving home how secretive and insidious it can be.
Yeah, it can be a bit, especially when you're in college, it seems, I mean, I don't remember caring at all because it's like, well, who cares about SGA? You know what I mean?
Right.
What effect does SGA have on my life whatsoever?
Yeah.
None. And I'm only going to be here for 4 years, so like, why do I give a shit about this?
Mm-hmm.
If they're trying to like seize power that no one gives a shit about anyway, then whatever. But then when you do realize, like we said to start off, how far into the future that can carry over into different, how far can my apathy let them go? Turns out pretty far.
Yeah, for real. They have reverberations into our adulthood, so many of them, except for John Merrill.
I wonder if they try to claim him.
Yeah, I just do not see how that guy was not in the machine, or he probably was in the Greek system, just not a machine candidate. What is that about?
Maybe he was an ATO with Shane.
Smoking weed.
It's your non-machine house.
It was nice to see Tuscaloosa in August filmed by HBO.
That was kind of cool. Do we want to get on how Tuscaloosa's cursed?
Do we have another few hours?
Well, I was just so reminded of it from the Halloween scenes on the Strip. I just thought, man, I've been there, and that's reminiscent of Adam's borrowed theory.
Yeah.
Do you think Tuscaloosa's cursed?
There may be just a touch of a curse, perhaps.
I've not heard this theory.
Well, listeners, we're going to tease you with that. One day we'll cover how Tuscaloosa's cursed. And if you've lived there, you've felt it, right?
I was going to say, I feel like if anybody can say it, it's somebody who was born and raised and lived there. I'm not saying it's, it's not holding you down or anything, but,
Just ask Michaela from Bama Rush if it's cursed. Ask Holiday from Bama Rush.
Rip.
We're going to wind it down there. That's the end of our episode. We will be off next week, but that gives you time to dive into your podcast app, find an Alabama Tape podcast, and enjoy some. We'll talk to you in 2 weeks. Roll Tide.